to capitalize much easier than the Soviet Union, which is a fancy way of saying we got money quicker. Okay? And so the Soviet Union couldn't keep up with our spending. Now, beforehand, the Soviet Union had this thing called the Iron Curtain. Basically, the Berlin Wall, where they put up a big wall between themselves and everybody else, and they told their people, hey, we're protecting you from those evil outsiders because they'll come in here and murder and kill you. But we're protecting you. That's why we have the wall, right? And what else can you do when you seal your population off? Control the flow of information, right? You can tell the people, here's the way it is, and they'll believe you because they have no other frame of reference. And so the Soviet used to tell people, oh, those Americans are terrible, they'll kill you in your sleep, and they'll take your money and just do terrible things to you. And the Russian people, or the Soviet people, believed that. Okay. Fast forward to they're running out of money, so they figured out the only way that we can get more money is to bring in tourists from the outside. Prior to that, they wouldn't let tourists in. And that was the fatal downfall of the Soviet Union. Tourism, not the military, tourism. Why? What was the quote I started with?
They didn't let other people in, so people were prejudiced against them.
Okay. And then when you start letting other people in, what happens?
They start to accept you.
They get to know you and they say, hey, wait a minute. These Americans, I do my Russian accent. These Americans are not so bad. They have blue jeans and Walkman. Why don't we have blue jeans and Walkman? They have plenty of money. We have no money. Maybe Soviet Union isn't best after all. Maybe they lied to us the whole time. I do a pretty good Soviet accent. And so the Soviet people said, well, wait a minute. Seriously. They've been telling us these Americans are horrible people. They come over here, and they're really nice to me. This guy gave me some blue jeans and, rock and roll music and all that other stuff. And then they started to question the whole Soviet Union communist system. And when the people turn against you, what happens? It's all over. They basically overthrew their own government back in 1991, I believe. A couple people got killed, okay? It wasn't bloodless, but far less than millions that would have been killed in a nuclear holocaust. Okay? So that's how tourism changed the world, because they figured we got to bring people in, and once they did, the Western idea spread, and there was no turning back. And I think that's pretty cool. Okay? Yeah, so. All right. So I always have to follow an interesting story with boring definitions. That's just the way it is. Sorry. We have to define tourism. And if you look at your textbook, tourism comprises of activities of people traveling to and staying in places outside their usual environment. This is a horribly boring definition. And on top of that, it is very broad. I mean, think about this. Comprises activities of people traveling to and staying in places outside their usual environment. That's very unclear. Let's say you decide today that instead of going back to your apartment and hanging out, you're going to go to a friend's apartment and hang out. Are you a tourist? Under this definition, yeah, maybe I'm a tourist, right? Or maybe you go, stay the night over your friend's house or whatever. Are you a tourist? It's a horrible definition. Now, if we add this to it, it makes it a little bit more clear. You're a tourist if you stay not more than one consecutive year for business, leisure, and other purposes. What happens if you go somewhere and you stay more than a year? You're a resident. Excellent. Under a year, you're considered a tourist. Okay. Now, if if you were to get a bunch of tourism professors together and put them in a room and say, okay, define tourists and tourism, there'd probably be a fist fight, which would be fun to watch, actually. Some of my colleagues do that. But even they can't agree on what the technical definition is. Okay? It's very unclear. But most of them would agree to this. A person who stays for more than one night and less than 1 year. And sometimes they add this to it. Ask Dr. Cardenas in his class what it is. You have to travel more than 30 miles from your home. Okay? So if you go stay at your friend's house overnight, and it's within 30 miles, you're not a tourist. Yes?
So if we were, say, traveling to see family,
Uh-huh.
but it was over 30 miles, would that mean we're technically tourists?
According to this definition, you see where it gets really funky? Yeah. Well, the other thing too is that business people are tourists. When they travel for business, they definitely travel over 30 miles and they stay overnight. And so it gets really, that's why I say you can't even get the tourism professors to agree on what a tourist is. But it kind of looks like this is what I'm trying to say. You have a question?
What are college students considered tourists or residents? Because I live here every year, but then I go home for the summers. Less than a year, but I'm here 4 years already.
That's a really good question. What do you think you are?
I consider, I'm not a tourist, but I'm not a resident. I don't know my driver's license is here.
Temporary resident. You're a resident, probably a temporary resident there. Because you're gonna stay more here than you are over there. It could go either way. I mean, you see how it gets really complicated? Yes, sir.
So your trip up to Lake Murray wouldn't be considered tourism?
Are you staying overnight?
For argument's sake, sure.
How far is Lake Murray from here?
20, 25 miles.
Again, you know what? I would probably consider you a tourist, but the technical definition is no, you're not a
That is
tourist.
good too, because it wouldn't be like in your normal realm of like expenses.
They see where it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, according to the definition, you're not, but I also look at your purpose. Why are you there? Well, you're there for leisure, to have fun, and it's not your place. Yeah, you're a tourist. But again, the reason I bring this up, other fact is probably going to be on the test, is that just know that it's very complicated, especially now. People have so many different travel motivations and different types of travel. It gets very complicated. I wish I had a more definitive answer for you. Maybe Dr. Cardenas in his class can narrow it down.
I think that would be like, you have the whole class say their definitions of it, and everyone had a different one, and he said that we're all right.
Thanks for clearing that up. Yeah. Okay. So, some people try to say, well, you're a visitor. Well, visitor can be ambiguous, but there is actually a definition according to the tourism expert. A visitor is a person who visits a country other than where they reside, not for more than a year. Thus, it puts you in the situation of all visitors are tourists, but not all tourists are visitors. Unless you lived on the Canadian border and you went and you stayed 10 miles from your house, I guess you could be a visitor and not a tourist according to the definition. That's getting really weird. Okay? Does anybody know what you are? Now, where's my guy there? All right. You go to the beach for the day, more than 30 miles, but you don't stay overnight. You come home. What are you?
Visitor.
No? You're actually what's called an excursionist. People who travel to a site and return the same day.
So that would be like if you went up to a game at Charlotte.
Yeah. And came home and slept in your own bed. You'd be an excursionist. Okay? I would definitely know these definitions because you'll see them again. As ambiguous as they are, you have distinct differences between the three. Hint, hint, hint. Everyone see the differences? So if I said, you're a person who visits a country other than where you reside from, not for more than 1 year, what are you? Visitor, good. All right. I don't know about this. Okay. Who in here loves history? Okay. Really? I love history. History is very cool. I love history and I love hospitality and tourism. So when I get to lecture about both of them at the same time, I'm like in heaven. And when we talk about the history of tourism and travel, we break them down into specific ages. Okay, like if we looked at the civilization, we categorize them by ages, right? What are some of the ages that we talk about as civilization advances? What's the first age?
Ice Age?
Oh, okay, Ice Age, give you Ice Age, but when man really started.
Stone Age?
Stone Age, right? And then from the Stone Age, Bronze Age, excellent. So we progress, right? What are we in right now? You all are right, but there's a specific name for it.
Millennial?
Information Age. Yeah, now you remember. Okay. Anyways, in tourism, we have different ages. We don't call them Stone Age or Bronze Age. They have their own categories. And the first one is the pre-industrial revolution. And this is by far the longest. This is basically from the beginning of man's time up until fairly recently.